This is the journal notes for qualitative graphs on page 45 through 47. Qualitative graphs are graphs that are used to represent situations without specific numerical values. You have quantity, which is the number that represents something, the amount of something, and then you have quality that tells how good or bad something is. It's using words to describe. Only the qualities of the values matter, not the amount, not the quantities, only the quality of it. It provides a way to identify basic relationships between the variables, so linear or nonlinear, decreasing, increasing, continuous, piecewise, those different types of basic relationships. So look at example 1. The graph at the right displays the temperature throughout the day. Describe the change in temperature over time. So we can see here that as the day goes on, as the sun is rising, if you will, the temperature is increasing. And here is going to be the hottest part of the day. And then as the sun sets, of course, the temperature goes down again. And that's exactly how we would explain this. The temperature increases as the sun rises, then decreases as the sun sets. Number 2. The graph at the right represents revenue from a local clothing store. Describe the sales over time. Well, when the store first opens, sales increase, of course, because if you're closed, you can't sell anything. So when the store opens, the sales begin to increase. There is a time of decline in sales, and then sales begin to increase over time. And look at the next one. The graph at the right displays the number of people at a restaurant during the morning and afternoon. Describe the change in the number of people over time. When the restaurant opens, customers come to eat breakfast. There is a lull or a dead time between breakfast rush and lunch. As people take lunch, as people take a lunch break, the customers in the restaurant increase, or the number of people in the restaurant increases. And let's look at page 46. How do we skip? This is how we interpret. Page 45 is how we interpret them, or how we analyze the qualitative graphs. Page 46 is how do we sketch the qualitative graph. Alright, on page 46, example number 2, sketching qualitative graphs. So we just learned how to analyze them, and now we're going to talk about sketching them. A tennis ball is dropped onto the floor. On each successive bounce, it rebounds to a height less than its previous bounce height until it comes to a rest on the floor. Sketch a qualitative graph to represent the situation. So since it's qualitative, we're not going to use any numbers, but we do still have to label our X and Y axis. We're dealing with the time that the tennis ball is bouncing and the height at which it's bouncing. The height depends on how long it's been since we dropped the ball. So the independent variable is going to be time, and the dependent variable is going to be height, because the height of the ball depends on how long it's been. So we label our y-axis height and our x-axis time. When we drop the ball, we're dropping from a height up here. It's going to bounce down, hit the floor, and come back up to height less than its previous bounce height. So each time it comes up, it's not going to be quite as high until eventually you know that whenever you drop a ball, it starts to go faster and lower to the ground until it comes to a rest. Alright, number 2, for example 2. An athlete alternates between running and walking during a workout. Sketch a qualitative graph to represent the situation. So, whenever you run, you cover distance over time. Time is typically going to be the independent variable because you have no control over time. And then the distance depends on how much time has passed as to how far the athlete has gone. So distance is our y-axis and time is our x-axis. After 0 minutes have passed, the athlete has not covered any distance, so we're going to start at the origin. The athlete is running first and then walking. So we have a steep slope and then a not as steep slope. And that pattern continues because the athlete continues to alternate between running and walking. So when you're making these graphs, you are just reading the word problem and sketching it exactly as it tells you to. It's pretty self-explanatory whenever you're sketching qualitative graphs. Let's look at the last one on page 46. Angela and Lori are hiking a mountain. The beginning of the trail is not too steep, and they start out at a quick pace, so this is going to be a steep slope. They stop and rest for several minutes, then climb a steeper part of the trail at a slower pace until they reach the highest point of the trail. They rest again before climbing down at a constant rate, faster than they climb the mountain. So coming down is going to be steeper than going up. Sketch a graph to show the distance compared to time. If it's distance compared to time, time is going to be the independent variable. Distance is going to be the dependent variable. So we label our y-axis with distance and our independent variable with time. Again, these are qualitative graphs. Since they're not quantitative, we don't have to put numbers for our x and y-axis. So they start off, it's not too steep, so they can go at a quick pace. And then they have to stop and rest. When they stop and rest, no distance is being covered, but time is still passing, so that's going to be horizontal. Then they come to a steeper part of the trail. It does not mean that the slope is steeper on the graph. It means that it's steeper on the trail, which is causing them to cover less distance over time, so it's going to be not as steep of a graph until they get to the top and they stop to rest again. Then they climb down at a faster rate than what they climbed up. They didn't just fall off the mountain, so you do have to have it slanted, but it needs to be a steeper slope than what it was whenever we first went up the mountain. Alright, let's look at page 47. So on page 45, we talked about analyzing graphs. On page 46, we learned how to sketch the graphs. And now on page 47, we're going to talk about how to interpret qualitative graphs. So this graph shows a carpenter's distance from the ground while working on a house. Describe what could be happening in each section. So we have a graph that's been labeled into part A, B, C, D, E, and F. In part A, the carpenter is climbing up the ladder to get to the top of the roof. In part B, he is working on the roof. You see that time is passing, but he's not going up or down. He's just on top of the roof, so we know that he's working on the roof while he's up there. In part C, he climbs down the ladder where he possibly took a break during part D. Now, he could have forgotten something, had to come back down and get something, and then went back up, or he could have come down for his lunch break, but he came down the ladder, and he's on the ground, and then in part E, he climbs back up the roof, or back up the ladder to the top of the roof, where he continues working during part F. The next one. This graph shows Mr. Tosti's distance from home as he drives to work one morning. Which section of the graph and corresponding description match? Alright, so example A, or section A, Mr. Tosti leaves home, first driving slowly, then picking up speed. Let's look at section B. Mr. Tosti continues driving at a constant speed. Well, he is not covering any distance as time is passing, so he is not driving at a constant speed because he's not covering any distance. He could be at a stop sign, at a red light. He has stopped somewhere because time is passing but no distance is being covered. Section C, Mr. Tosti forgot something and returned home to get it. Well, this shows the graph going all the way back to the x-axis, which means that y is 0. If y is 0, there's no distance from his home, so this does show that he went back home. But let's look at D. Mr. Tosti drives to work, making a stop along the way. From this point, the whole D section, there is no stop. He is continuing at a constant speed, so he did not make a stop along the way. If we look back at section A, he's driving first slowly, then picking up speed. He is covering a constant, he's got a constant slope for the whole section A, so it can't be A either, so this would be section C. So section C corresponds to the description match because the graph goes back to the x-axis, I apologize, where the y coordinate is 0. This means he had to return home. This concludes our notes for qualitative graphs, and now we will begin practicing qualitative graphs.